In the quiet town of Hillsdale, Michael Davis's life changed forever when he collapsed after working 3 sleepless nights to install a heating system for William Cooper, an elderly Vietnam veteran living in a freezing home. Victoria Hamilton, the powerful CEO of a regional construction company and Bill's former student, arrived to check on her old teacher only to find not just a warm house, but the unconscious body of a man who'd sacrificed his health to help someone who couldn't pay. What happened next stunned the community. Instead of simply thanking Michael and moving on, Victoria discovered his story. A master plumber who had abandoned lucrative commercial contracts to care for his dying wife, now raising his college-age daughter while facing foreclosure on his shop. Standing in Michael's hospital room, Victoria made a decision that would transform both their lives and the entire town, proving that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen when we're at our most vulnerable. And that true craftsmanship still has value in a world that's forgotten how to appreciate it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The clock on the wall of Davis Plumbing and Heating read 7:15 p.m., its soft ticking nearly drowned out by the sound of metal tools against pipe fittings. Michael Davis wiped sweat from his brow with a rag that had seen better days, leaving a smudge of pipe joint compound across his weathered forehead. At 50, his hands still moved with the precision of a surgeon, but the lines around his eyes had deepened over the years, carved by worry as much as age. Just a little more, Michael muttered to himself, carefully tightening the final connection on the ancient boiler he'd spent the last 36 hours rebuilding. The system was unlike anything installed in the last 20 years, but Michael Davis had built his reputation on fixing what others claimed was beyond repair. He straightened up slowly, his back protesting after hours bent over the basement worksite. The small space heater in the corner barely took the edge off the late autumn chill. Michael glanced at the collection of empty coffee cups on the workbench and couldn't remember which one was from today and which were from yesterday. Outside, Hillsdale slept, unaware of the small miracle taking place in the modest home at the edge of town. Michael's truck, with Davis Plumbing and Heating on the side, the paint faded but still legible, sat in the driveway of William Cooper's small house, its presence as familiar on this street as it had been for the past 3 days. Michael stretched, feeling the pop in his joints, then returned to the boiler. His calloused fingers made minute adjustments to the ancient controls, each movement deliberate and precise. This wasn't just another job. This was a commitment he'd made to himself when Nancy Foster from Social Services had called him about an elderly veteran facing winter without heat. "Dad?" The soft voice startled him. Michael looked up to see his 21-year-old daughter, Olivia, standing. At the bottom of the basement stairs, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder and concern written across her face. "Liv, what are you doing here? I thought you had exams." "I finished early and drove straight here. Mrs. Winters called me. She said, 'You've been here for days.'" Olivia navigated around the tools and parts with the familiarity of someone who'd grown up watching her father work. "It's almost 8 o'clock. You haven't slept in days." Michael smiled wearily. "Almost done, sweetheart. Just need to fire it. Up and make sure everything's working properly." Olivia frowned, the concerned expression making her look momentarily like her mother. "You promised Dr. Wilson you'd take it easier after what happened last month. This is different. Mr. Cooper can't go through winter without heat. And you can't keep working yourself to exhaustion, Dad. That's why I brought dinner." Olivia held up the bag. "And I'm not leaving until you eat something and get some rest." She placed a container of homemade stew on a clear corner of the workbench. The steam rising from it when she removed the lid reminded Michael that he couldn't remember. "His last proper meal. Just a couple more adjustments, then I'll eat. Promise." Michael turned back to the boiler. his movements now hurried by the awareness of his daughter's watchful eyes. He connected the final wires to the thermostat, checking each connection twice. The system he'd cobbled together was part restoration, part reinvention. The parts for the original 1960s boiler were no longer manufactured, so he'd fabricated several himself in his shop after hours. "Is Mr. Cooper upstairs?" Olivia asked, glancing toward the ceiling. "Coach Douglas took him to the VFW hall for dinner, said he didn't want to be in the way." "The man whose house you're fixing for free thought he was in the way." Olivia's voice held a mixture of admiration and exasperation. "Bill Cooper taught shop to half this town, including me. Man deserves to be warm in his own home." Michael's tone made it clear the subject wasn't open for debate. He carefully turned the system on, listening intently as the old boiler grumbled to life. Water moved through the pipes, creating a symphony of clanks and hisses that only a plumber could properly interpret. Michael moved around the basement, touching pipes, feeling for heat, listening for problems. Gradually, the ancient radiators throughout the house began to warm. Michael's face relaxed into a satisfied smile as heat spread through the long cold. "Home. There you go, beautiful," he murmured, patting the boiler like an old friend. Olivia watched her father with a mixture of pride and worry. "Now will you eat something?" Michael nodded, suddenly aware of his hunger and exhaustion. He washed his hands in the utility sink and joined his daughter on the basement steps where she'd set out their impromptu dinner. "How much is Mr. Cooper paying you for all this?" Olivia asked, already knowing the answer. Michael shrugged. "He's not. He can't." "Dad, it's fine, Liv. I had the parts from old jobs just sitting in the shop. Parts you could have sold or used on paying jobs." Michael took a bite of stew instead of answering. They both knew she was right. But some things were more important than money. William Cooper had spent 40 years teaching kids to work with their hands. If Michael could give him a few more comfortable years in his own home, that was payment enough. As they ate in companionable silence, the house around them gradually warmed, the creaking of expanding radiator pipes a testament to Michael's success. When he finished eating, Michael gathered his tools while Olivia cleaned up their dinner. "I'll fire up the truck," Olivia said. "You're in no condition to drive." Michael started to protest but stopped when a wave of dizziness hit him. Maybe his daughter was right. 3 days with minimal sleep and food had left him more depleted than he wanted to admit. "I need to leave Mr. Cooper instructions for the system," he said instead. "Write them down. I'll make sure he gets them tomorrow." Michael sat at Cooper's kitchen table, his handwriting more unsteady than usual as he detailed the operation of the heating system. The thermostat was old but functional, the radiators would need bleeding occasionally, and the pressure gauge readings to watch for. Simple instructions for a man who had taught generations of boys how to build and fix things. When finished, Michael surveyed the kitchen. The house was warm now, warmer than it had been in years, according to what Cooper had told him. The old veteran would no longer need to sleep in his recliner by the space heater, wrapped in layers of blankets. He could use his whole house again. This thought gave Michael a satisfaction that transcended his exhaustion. He followed Olivia out to his truck, the cool night air a shock after the newly warmed house. "I can drive, Liv. You've got classes tomorrow." "I don't, actually, and you can barely stand up straight." The stubborn streak that had kept Davis Plumbing and Heating open when all logic said it should have closed years ago made Michael want to argue, but he didn't have the energy. He handed his keys to his daughter and climbed into the passenger seat of his own truck. As Olivia drove through the quiet streets of Hillsdale, Michael leaned his head against the window, watching the familiar landmarks of his hometown drift by. Storefronts where he'd installed plumbing systems decades ago, homes where he'd responded to midnight emergencies, the high school where Bill Cooper had once taught him the basics of metalworking. "I saw Richard Stewart's car outside the shop yesterday," Olivia said, breaking the silence. Michael grimaced. Richard Stewart's development company had been buying up properties all along Main Street, and he'd made no secret of his interest in the prime corner lot where Davis Plumbing and Heating had stood for 3 generations. What did he want? Same as always. Offered to buy the building, said I'd be smart to sell before property values drop when his new development goes in. And you said, same as always, the shop's not for sale. Olivia sighed. Dad, maybe it's time to consider not happening, Liv. That shop was your grandfather's. It'll be there for you if you ever want it. I'm studying engineering, not plumbing. Engineers need to understand how things actually work. Besides, it's our legacy. The stubbornness in his voice ended the conversation. They drove the rest of the way in silence, passing through a town that seemed caught between its past and an uncertain future. When they arrived at Michael's small house a few blocks from his shop, he was too exhausted to do more than kick off his boots before collapsing onto his bed. Olivia made sure he was settled, then curled up on the couch, not wanting to make the drive back to her dorm tonight. Too many nights she'd worried about her father working himself to exhaustion with no one checking on him. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through windows that needed washing. Michael woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Olivia talking on her phone in the kitchen. He finished it last night. No, he didn't take any payment. I know, Nancy, but you know how stubborn he is. Yes, Mr. Cooper should have heat. Throughout the house now. Michael pushed himself up, ignoring the protest from muscles stiff from days of labor and too few hours of sleep. He had jobs scheduled today, a leaky faucet at Mrs. Thompson's house and a backed-up drain at the diner. No time for recovery. As he shuffled toward the bathroom, a sharp pain squeezed his chest like a vice grip. Michael clutched at his shirt, breath coming in short gasps. The pain radiated down his left arm, and a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. Dad, Olivia called from the kitchen. I made coffee. The sound of something heavy hitting the floor interrupted her. Olivia dropped her phone and ran toward the hallway, finding her father collapsed on the floor, his face contorted in pain. Dad, what's wrong? She knelt beside him, panic rising in her throat. Can't breathe. Michael gasped, his face ashen. Olivia grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. I need an ambulance at 156 Maple Street, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. My father's having chest pains. I think it might be a heart attack. The dispatcher asked questions that Olivia answered as calmly as she could, all while keeping her free hand pressed against her father's shoulder. Help's coming, Dad, she murmured, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Just stay with me, okay? Stay with me. Michael tried to respond, but another wave of pain washed over him. His last conscious thought was of Bill Cooper's house, now warm for the first time in years, and the bitter irony that it might be the last heating system he'd ever install. Across town, in William Cooper's newly heated home, the old veteran sat in his kitchen, reading the handwritten instructions Michael had left. The house was warm, truly warm, for the first time in 3 winters. Since Elizabeth had passed, Bill had closed off most of the rooms, unable to afford heating the entire house on his fixed income. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Bill rose stiffly, his artificial knee protesting the quick movement, and made his way to the front door. Outside stood a well-dressed woman in her mid-40s, her expression professional but warm. Mr. Cooper? I'm Victoria Hamilton. I'm not. Sure, if you remember me, I was in your shop class, 1995. Bill squinted, then his face broke into a smile of recognition. Little Vicky Hamilton, of course I remember. You built that beautiful oak desk for your final project. Best in the class. Victoria smiled. It's still in my office. I'd heard you weren't well and I wanted to check on you while I was in town. Come in, come in. Bill gestured for her to enter, leading her into the warm kitchen. "I'm doing much better today. Got my heat working again thanks to Mike Davis." Victoria Hamilton stepped into the modest home of her former teacher, unaware that her life was about to become inextricably linked with the plumber who had just restored heat to this house, and whose own life now hung in the balance across town. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The ambulance's siren wailed through the quiet morning streets of Hillsdale, slicing through the routine of an ordinary Tuesday. Inside, paramedics worked efficiently over Michael Davis's still form, attaching monitors and inserting an IV line. Male, mid-50s, possible myocardial infarction, one paramedic reported into her radio as her partner checked Michael's vital. Signs, BP 90-60, pulse weak and irregular, the second paramedic called out. "Let's move quickly." In the ambulance's wake, Olivia Davis followed in her father's truck, knuckles white on the steering wheel, blinking back tears that threatened to blind her. The drive to Hillsdale General Hospital took 7 minutes that stretched like hours in her mind. At William Cooper's house, Victoria Hamilton accepted a cup of tea, observing the dramatic change in the home's temperature. "Your house feels much warmer than when I visited last Christmas with the Veterans Committee," Victoria commented, removing her tailored jacket. Bill nodded, his weathered hands wrapped around his own mug. "Mike Davis fixed the whole heating system. Been working on it for 3 days straight." 3 days? Victoria raised an eyebrow. "That's dedication." "Wouldn't take a dime for it either," Bill added, gesturing around his modest kitchen. "Said it was his contribution to a fellow tradesman." Victoria's expression shifted to one of professional interest. "I don't think I know him. Is he with one of the larger contractors?" No, Davis Plumbing and Heating. Small shop downtown. Been there forever. His father had it before him." Bill's face creased with fondness. "Mike was one of my students years back. Had a real talent for metalwork. Could have gone into engineering, but he loved working with his hands." The conversation was interrupted by the shrill ring of the landline phone mounted on Bill's kitchen wall. The old veteran rose stiffly and answered it. "Hello? Yes, Coach. What's—" His expression darkened. "Mike? When?" "Dear God." Victoria watched as Bill's face paled beneath his perpetual tan, his posture stiffening in the way she remembered from when he'd received bad news about former students during her high school years. "Which hospital? Hillsdale General?" "I'll be right there." Bill hung up the phone, his movements suddenly less certain. "That was Coach Douglas. Mike Davis collapsed this morning. They think it's his heart." Victoria stood immediately. "I'll drive you. You don't have to." "I insist." Victoria cut him off gently. "It sounds like Mr. Davis went above and beyond for you. The least I can do is help you check on him." In the pristine lobby of Hillsdale General Hospital, Olivia Davis paced, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. She'd been relegated to the waiting area while doctors assessed her father's condition. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from Tyler Adams, her dad's apprentice, who'd arrived at the empty shop to find a note about scheduled appointments, but no Michael. "Miss Davis." Olivia turned to see Dr. Robert Wilson, her father's physician for as long as she could remember, approaching with a tablet in hand. "How is he?" The question came out as a whisper. Dr. Wilson guided her to a quieter corner. "Your father suffered a cardiac event, likely brought on by extreme exhaustion and physical strain. We're running tests to determine the extent of the damage, but he's stable for now. Can I see him?" "In a little while. He's resting." Dr. Wilson hesitated. "Olivia, this wasn't his first warning sign. I told him after his episode last month that he needed to slow down. Did he mention that to you?" Olivia's face registered shock. "Episode? What episode?" He experienced similar chest pains while working on a job. Apparently, he just sat in his truck until it passed, then finished the installation. Dr. Wilson shook his head. I ran some tests, told him he needed to reduce his stress and workload. He promised he would. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. Of course he hadn't told her. He never wanted her to worry, even when worry was warranted. What happens now? He needs complete rest. No work for at least 3 weeks, possibly longer, depending on the test results. And when he does return, it needs to be at a reduced capacity. The double doors to the waiting area swung open, and Olivia looked up to see Bill Cooper entering, supported by a well-dressed woman she didn't recognize. Mr. Cooper, Olivia moved toward them. You shouldn't have come all this way. Had to check on Mike, Bill insisted, his voice gruff with concern. How is he? Stable, Olivia said, the word feeling inadequate. They're running tests. Bill nodded, then seemed to remember his companion. This is Victoria Hamilton. She was kind enough to drive me. Victoria extended her hand. I'm so sorry about your father. Bill was just telling me about the incredible work he did on the heating system. Before Olivia could respond, the admissions clerk called out, Miss Davis, we need insurance information for your father. Excuse me, Olivia murmured, stepping away to handle the administrative details that somehow continued even when life itself hung in the balance. At the desk, the clerk's expression grew increasingly sympathetic as Olivia explained the situation. With her father's health insurance, a high-deductible plan he'd switched to when premiums had risen beyond what his small business could afford. I understand, the clerk said finally. Just sign these forms for now, and we can discuss payment. Arrangements later. Returning to the waiting area, Olivia found Bill Cooper seated, while Victoria Hamilton spoke on her phone a short distance away, her tone authoritative even in hushed conversation. Ms. Davis, Dr. Wilson approached again. Your father's awake. You can see him now, but only for a few minutes. He needs rest. Olivia turned to Bill. Would you like to come? I know Dad would want to make sure you're okay with the heating system. Bill nodded gratefully, and together they followed Dr. Wilson. Through the maze of hospital corridors, Victoria trailing slightly behind at Olivia's inclusion. Michael Davis looked diminished against the white hospital sheets, his usually robust frame somehow smaller beneath the thin cotton blanket. IV lines snaked from his arm, and the steady beep of monitoring equipment marked each heartbeat. Dad, Olivia moved quickly to his side, taking his hand. Michael's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition, then embarrassment. Liv, I'm sorry about this. Don't you dare apologize, she whispered fiercely. Just focus on getting better. Michael's gaze moved past her to Bill Cooper. Bill, the heating system is working perfectly, Bill assured him. Whole house is warm for the first time in years. Relief washed over Michael's face. Good, that's good. His eyes shifted to Victoria, standing unobtrusively near the door. Confusion flickered across his features again. This is Victoria Hamilton, Bill explained. Former student of mine. She was checking on me when we heard what happened. Michael attempted a polite nod, wincing slightly at the movement. Miss Hamilton, sorry you had to come all this way. Victoria stepped forward. Not at all, Mr. Davis. I'm glad to know you're receiving care. Her gaze took in the hospital room, the monitors, and the barely concealed worry on Olivia's face. Is there anything you need? Anything I can help with? Before Michael could respond, a nurse entered. I need to check Mr. Davis's vitals now. You'll all need to step out. In the hallway, Olivia's composure finally cracked. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to stifle a sob. He'll be all right, Bill said awkwardly, patting her shoulder. Your dad's strong. Victoria watched the interaction, her analytical mind processing everything she'd learned in the past hour. "Olivia," she said gently, "would you join me for coffee in the cafeteria? I'd like to hear more about your father's business. Bill mentioned he has a plumbing shop downtown." Olivia wiped her eyes, slightly taken aback by the shift in conversation. "Yes, Davis Plumbing and Heating. It's been in our family for 3 generations. Would you mind telling me about it? I have some connections in the trades through my company. Perhaps there's a way we can help during your father's recovery." The hospital cafeteria offered institutional coffee and bright fluorescent lighting. Both too harsh for comfort, Victoria purchased coffee for them both, adding an unexpected kindness by bringing Olivia a sandwich she hadn't asked for but clearly needed. "You should eat something," Victoria said, pushing the plate toward her. "It helps with the shock." Olivia looked at the sandwich, suddenly aware of how many hours had passed since her last meal. "Thank you." She took a small bite, then another, hunger overriding her emotional turmoil. "Tell me about Davis Plumbing and Heating," Victoria prompted, after Olivia had eaten a bit. "How many employees? What kind of work do you specialize in?" "Just Dad and Tyler Adams, his apprentice, and me during school breaks." Olivia took a sip of coffee. "We do residential and small commercial installations, repairs, some restoration work on older systems like Mr. Cooper's." "And business is good?" Victoria asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. Olivia hesitated. Victoria Hamilton was a stranger, and Hillsdale was a small town where business reputation mattered. But something in the woman's direct gaze invited honesty. "It's been difficult since Mom died 5 years ago. Dad turned down a lot of work during her illness, and some clients moved to other contractors. He's been rebuilding, but the building needs repairs, equipment needs updating, and Richard Stewart's been trying to buy the property for his new development." Olivia's voice hardened slightly. "He's been pressuring Dad, telling clients we might not be in business much longer." Victoria's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in her eyes. "I know Richard Stewart by reputation. His development projects tend to favor chain stores over local businesses." "Exactly. Dad refuses to sell, says the shop is our legacy, but with these medical bills now..." Olivia trailed off, the reality of their situation settling like a weight on her shoulders. "Your father's work on Bill's heating system. It was impressive craftsmanship from what Bill described." Olivia nodded, pride momentarily displacing worry. "Dad can fix anything. He specializes in older systems that other plumbers won't touch. People come from 3 counties away for his restoration work, but it's time-consuming and doesn't pay as well as new installations." Victoria considered this information, her fingers lightly tapping the side of her coffee cup. "Does he have jobs scheduled right now that need coverage?" "Several. Mrs. Thompson's faucet repair, the diner's drain, a radiator issue at the library. Tyler can handle some of it, but the more complex jobs..." Olivia shook her head. "I've been calling clients all morning, trying to reschedule. What if we found someone to cover those jobs? An experienced plumber who could step in temporarily?" Olivia looked up, surprise evident on her face. "Why would you do that?" Victoria smiled slightly. "Let's just say I appreciate craftsmen who take pride in their work. Bill Cooper taught me that value, and clearly your father exemplifies it." She reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the table. "I'm in town for a few days. Think about it and call me if you'd like to discuss possibilities." Olivia glanced down at the card. Hamilton Construction was embossed in silver on heavy cream stock, with Victoria's name and Chief Executive Officer beneath it. You're the CEO of Hamilton Construction?" Olivia's voice reflected her amazement. The company was a major regional presence, with projects throughout the state. "I am." Victoria rose from the table. "And I never forget people who helped me along the way, like Bill Cooper, or those who helped them, like your father. As Victoria left the cafeteria, Olivia stared at the business card in her hand, trying to process what had just happened. In the midst of one of the worst days of her life, an unexpected ally had appeared. Whether that would make any difference remained to be seen. Back in Michael's hospital room, Dr. Wilson was reviewing test results with his patient, his expression serious. "Michael, I don't think you're grasping the severity of the situation. This was a warning sign, and we were lucky to catch it before a major cardiac event. Next time, you might not be so fortunate." Michael shifted uncomfortably against the pillows. "How long before I can get back to work? I've got clients waiting," Dr. Wilson sighed. "This is exactly the attitude that landed you here. Minimum 3 weeks of complete rest, then a gradual return with significantly reduced hours and stress." 3 weeks? Michael's voice rose in alarm. "Doc, my business can't survive 3 weeks without me. And your daughter can't survive without you at all," Dr. Wilson countered sharply. "It's time to prioritize your health, Michael. Find someone to cover your workload or postpone it. Those are your options if you want to see Olivia graduate college." The harsh reality of the doctor's words silenced Michael's protests. He closed his eyes briefly, the beeping of the heart monitor a stark reminder of his vulnerability. "I understand," he said finally, his voice subdued. Dr. Wilson's expression softened. "Good. We'll run a few more tests tomorrow. But if everything looks stable, you can go home the day after, on the condition that you actually rest." After the doctor left, Michael lay in the sterile hospital room, his mind racing despite his physical exhaustion. 3 weeks without work meant 3 weeks without income. The mortgage payment on the shop was already overdue, and Howard Jensen at the bank had made it clear that his patience was wearing thin. Richard Stewart would see this as the perfect opportunity to renew his pressure tactics. The door opened, and Olivia returned, her expression more composed than when she'd left. "Everything okay, Liv?" Michael asked, automatically concerned for his daughter, despite his own situation. Olivia sat in the chair beside the bed. "I met Victoria Hamilton. She's the CEO of Hamilton Construction." "The woman who was here earlier? Bill's former student?" "Yes. She offered to help find someone to cover your jobs while you recover." Olivia hesitated. "I think we should consider it, Dad." Michael frowned. "We don't need charity from some big construction company, Liv. It's not charity. It's practical. Assistance when we need it most." Olivia leaned forward. "Dr. Wilson told me about your episode last month. Why didn't you tell me?" Michael looked away, discomfort evident in his posture. "Didn't want you to worry. You have enough on your plate with school. And you think finding out like this is better?" Olivia's voice cracked slightly. "Dad, you can't keep doing this. Mom's gone, but I'm still here and I need you healthy." The mention of Margaret, gone 5 years now to the cancer that had ravaged her body and their savings, hung heavy in the room. Michael reached for his daughter's hand. "I'm sorry, Liv, I should have told you." "Yes, you should have." She squeezed his hand. "And you should accept help when it's offered. Victoria Hamilton seems genuinely interested in supporting local tradespeople. At least hear what she has to say." Michael studied his daughter's face, seeing the stubborn determination she'd inherited from him, tempered by her mother's practicality. In that moment, he realized he was outmatched. "All right," he conceded. "I'll talk to her, but no promises." Across town, Victoria Hamilton sat in her rental car outside Davis Plumbing and Heating, studying the modest storefront. The building had good bones, solid brick construction from the early 1900s, large display windows, a prime corner location. It needed work, certainly, but there was character here that couldn't be manufactured. She pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. "James? It's Victoria. I need you to look into something for me. A small plumbing business in Hillsdale, called Davis Plumbing and Heating. I want financials, reputation, outstanding loans, property value, the works." She listened to her brother's response, a slight smile playing at her lips. No, it's not a potential acquisition. Think of it as community investment research. She paused again. Trust me, James. This is important. After ending the call, Victoria started her car, but instead of driving away, she studied the building across the street, Stewart Development's local office. Through the large windows, she could see Richard Stewart himself at his desk, talking animatedly on the phone. Victoria's expression hardened. She recognized Stewart's type all too well. Developers who saw dollar signs instead of community value, who would erase a town's character for a quick profit. Her decision crystallized in that moment. Hillsdale might be just another small town to most people, but to Bill Cooper, it was home, and Michael Davis was the kind of craftsman her father had built Hamilton Construction's reputation on. People who did quality work with integrity, even when no one was looking. As Victoria finally drove away, her mind was already formulating a plan that would change not just Michael Davis's life, but the future of skilled trades education in Hillsdale. All because a plumber had chosen to help an elderly veteran when he couldn't afford to do so. 2 days later, Michael Davis sat on the edge of his hospital bed, fully dressed for the first time since his admission. His movements were cautious, as if testing the reliability of his own body. The discharge papers lay beside him, covered in instructions he had no intention of following completely. 3 weeks of rest seemed an impossible luxury when his livelihood hung in the balance. A soft knock on the doorframe drew his attention. Victoria Hamilton stood there, her business attire somehow not out of place in the clinical setting. "Ms. Hamilton," Michael acknowledged, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you again. Please, call me Victoria." She stepped into the room. "I hope to catch you before discharge. Olivia mentioned you'd be heading home today." Michael nodded, uncomfortable with the reminder that his daughter had been discussing his situation with this virtual stranger. "That's right. Back to normal. By tomorrow. Back to rest, according to your doctor," Victoria corrected mildly, "which is actually why I'm here. May I?" She gestured to the visitor's chair. Michael gave a grudging nod, and she seated herself, arranging her coat over the back of the chair with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Davis." "Michael?" "Michael?" she amended with a slight smile. "I've been speaking with Olivia about your business situation. I understand you're concerned about meeting client obligations during your recovery." Michael's posture stiffened. "With all due respect, Ms. Victoria, my business concerns are my own." "Of course they are," Victoria agreed smoothly. "But I have a proposition that might benefit us both." Michael raised an eyebrow, skepticism written across his weathered face. "I'm listening." Hamilton Construction is developing a trades training initiative. We're finding it increasingly difficult to locate skilled tradespeople for our projects, particularly those with knowledge of older building systems. Victoria leaned forward slightly. "What you did for Bill Cooper, restoring a heating system, most modern plumbers would have simply replaced. That's becoming a lost art." Michael's expression softened at the mention of his craft. "Most plumbers today just swap out parts. They don't understand how the systems actually work." "Exactly." Victoria nodded, recognizing she'd found an entry point. "Our company would like to document your restoration techniques as part of our training materials. In exchange, we'd provide temporary coverage for your scheduled jobs while you recover." Michael frowned. "You want to document my work?" "With your input and approval, of course. We'd send one of our master plumbers to handle your scheduled jobs with your apprentice. Tyler, is it? Assisting and learning. The plumber would document the specifics of each job, especially the older systems." "And what would Hamilton Construction get out of this arrangement?" Michael asked, years of negotiating supply contracts making him wary of deals that seemed too good to be true. Victoria smiled, appreciating his directness. Valuable technical knowledge that's increasingly rare in our industry. Knowledge we'd pay consultant rates for, I might add. Consultant rates? Yes. This wouldn't be charity, Michael. It would be a professional exchange. Your expertise for our assistance. For the first time since she'd entered the room, Michael seemed genuinely interested rather than defensive. I'd need to review any documentation before it's finalized. Make sure it's done right. I wouldn't have it any other way, Victoria assured him. In fact, that type of quality control would be essential to the arrangement. Michael was silent for a moment, considering the offer. It addressed his immediate concern about client obligations without wounding his pride, and the idea of preserving his techniques for future tradespeople appealed to the teacher in him. I'd want to meet this master plumber before agreeing to have him represent my business, he said finally. Of course. Martin Fletcher will be in Hillsdale this afternoon. He's been with Hamilton Construction for 15 years and has extensive experience with historical renovations. The speed of her response suggested to Michael that Victoria had anticipated his concerns and prepared accordingly. It was both impressive and slightly unsettling. You seem to have thought of everything, he observed. Victoria's expression became more serious. Not everything, but enough to offer a practical solution that respects both your business reputation and your health needs. A nurse entered with a wheelchair, the hospital's mandatory transport for discharged patients. Ready to go, Mr. Davis? Your daughter's waiting at the entrance. Michael nodded, then turned back to Victoria. Have your plumber meet me at my house at 3. If he checks out, we can discuss details. Thank you for considering the arrangement, Victoria said, rising from her chair. I believe it will benefit us both. As the nurse wheeled Michael from the room, he fought the conflicting emotions of relief and suspicion. Victoria Hamilton's offer seemed reasonable, even generous, but his lifelong independence made accepting help, even in the form of a business arrangement, deeply uncomfortable. At 3 o'clock precisely, a Hamilton construction truck pulled into Michael's driveway. Olivia, who had been hovering anxiously all day to ensure her father actually rested, answered the door to find a solidly built man in his late 40s standing on the porch. Martin Fletcher, he introduced himself, extending a calloused hand. I'm here to see Michael Davis. Olivia shook his hand, immediately noting the strength and roughness that marked a lifetime of physical work. Please come in. My dad's in the living room. She led Martin through the modest house to where Michael sat in his recliner, a stack of invoices balanced on the armrest, despite Olivia's protests that he should be resting. Dad, this is Martin Fletcher from Hamilton Construction. Michael sat aside the paperwork and stood carefully to shake the man's hand, assessing him with the quick evaluative glance of someone accustomed to sizing up fellow tradespeople. Ms. Hamilton speaks highly of your restoration work, Martin said after introductions were complete. Said you brought an old Burnham boiler back from the dead at Bill Cooper's place. Series 8, 1967 model, Michael confirmed, a hint of professional pride creeping into his voice. They don't make them like that anymore. No, they sure don't, Martin agreed with evident sincerity. Had to rebuild one in a historical building last year. Spent 2 weeks tracking down parts. You fabricate your own gaskets for those? Martin nodded. A custom cut. The original specifications are long gone, so it's all about experience and feel. Olivia, watching from the doorway, saw her father's posture relax incrementally as the technical conversation continued. The two men moved quickly into a discussion of restoration techniques that might as well have been a foreign language to her, but she recognized the growing respect in her father's expression. After 30 minutes of shop talk, Michael finally addressed the actual proposal. Victoria Hamilton says you'd cover my scheduled jobs while documenting the work. What's your experience with that kind of technical writing? Martin reached into his work bag and removed a tablet. I've been contributing to Hamilton's technical Archives for about 5 years now. Here's a sample of my documentation on a similar restoration project. Michael accepted the tablet and scrolled through the detailed photographs, diagrams, and explanations. The work was thorough, technically accurate, and presented with a clarity that spoke to years of practical experience. "This is good," he admitted, handing the tablet back. "Better than I expected," Martin smiled. "Ms. Hamilton doesn't do anything halfway. When she said she wanted to preserve traditional trade knowledge, she meant documenting it properly for future generations." Michael nodded slowly. "All right, I'd be willing to work with you on this arrangement, with 3 conditions." "Name them." "First, Tyler Adams works alongside you on every job. The boy needs the experience and my clients know him." "Agreed. That was already part of the plan." "Second, any technical documentation comes to me for review before it's finalized." "Absolutely. Your expertise is the whole point of the project." "And third," Michael continued, his expression hardening slightly, "my clients get the same quality. Work they'd get from me, or the arrangement ends immediately." Martin met his gaze steadily. "I wouldn't put my name on anything less, Mr. Davis. Quality work is a matter of professional pride." The simple statement, delivered without defensiveness, seemed to satisfy Michael more than any elaborate promise could have. He extended his hand again. "Then we have an agreement, pending review of the paperwork. I'll have it for you tomorrow morning," Martin assured him, "along with the schedule of your current jobs, which Tyler shared with Ms. Hamilton's office." After Martin left, Olivia brought her father a cup of coffee, unable to hide her relief. "He seems qualified." "He is," Michael acknowledged. "Knows his trade. That's something at least." "And this solves our immediate problem with scheduled clients," Olivia pointed out. "Plus, the consultant fee Victoria mentioned will help with expenses while you recover." Michael grunted non-committally, but Olivia could see the tension in his shoulders had eased. Having a solution for his professional obligations, delivered in a way that preserved his dignity, had clearly lifted some of the weight he'd been carrying. "What about Richard Stewart?" Olivia asked, voicing the concern that had been nagging at her. "He's been circling the shop like a vulture. If he finds out you're sidelined..." Michael's expression darkened. "Stewart's been trying to get his hands on that property for 2 years. This doesn't change anything. Maybe Victoria could..." "No," Michael cut her off firmly. "The arrangement with Hamilton Construction is strictly about covering my client work. I'm not bringing them into my property issues." Olivia recognized the stubborn set of her father's jaw and decided to let the matter drop for now. One battle at a time. The next morning, true to his word, Martin Fletcher arrived with a detailed contract outlining the arrangement between Davis Plumbing and Heating and Hamilton Construction. The terms were straightforward and fair, more than fair in Michael's estimation. Hamilton would provide master plumber coverage for all scheduled jobs, with Tyler assisting. All work would be done under the Davis Plumbing and Heating name, with clients billed at normal rates. Michael would receive a consulting fee for reviewing and approving the technical documentation, which would belong jointly to both parties. "This is generous," Michael said after reading the contract twice. Martin shrugged. "Ms. Hamilton values traditional craftsmanship, says it's what her father built the company on." Michael signed the contract, still slightly uncomfortable with accepting help, but reassured by the professional nature of the arrangement. "When do you start?" "This afternoon. Tyler's meeting me at Mrs. Thompson's house at 1 o'clock. "The faucet. Repair. That's a simple job," Martin smiled. "Good way to start. Let your clients get comfortable with me before we tackle anything more complex." After Martin left, Michael reluctantly settled back in his recliner, the signed contract on the side table beside him. Despite his natural skepticism, he had to admit that Victoria Hamilton had crafted a solution that addressed his needs while preserving his dignity. It was an unexpected kindness from someone who had no obligation to help, and it stirred uncomfortable emotions he'd rather not examine too closely. Across town, in the temporary office she'd established at Hillsdale's only business hotel, Victoria, Hamilton was deep in conversation with her brother James via video call. The financial report on Davis Plumbing and Heating just came in, James said, his expression concerned. Vicky, the business is barely staying afloat. Outstanding loan payments, equipment in need of upgrading, property taxes due next month. It's a mess. Victoria nodded, unsurprised. That matches what I've gathered from local sources. Richard Stewart's been applying pressure too, trying to force a sale of the property for his development project. So why are we getting involved? This sounds like a failing business, not an investment opportunity. Because Michael Davis represents something we claim to value at Hamilton Construction: craftsmanship, integrity, dedication to quality. Victoria leaned closer to the camera. You should see his work, James. He restored a heating system most contractors would have condemned, working 3 days straight without proper compensation because an elderly veteran needed heat. James sighed. Your heart's in the right place. But the company can't bail out every struggling tradesperson with good intentions. I'm not suggesting a bailout, Victoria countered. I'm suggesting a partnership that addresses a problem we've been discussing for years: the shortage of skilled trades knowledge, particularly for historical systems. James's skepticism was evident even through the video connection. And how exactly would this partnership work beyond the temporary coverage we're already providing? Victoria smiled, a hint of the strategic businesswoman emerging. I'm working on a proposal that would create a training center for the trades, with Davis as a cornerstone instructor. Hamilton Construction would provide funding and equipment, local schools would provide students, and we'd develop a pipeline of skilled tradespeople for our projects. A trades training center in Hillsdale? James looked incredulous. Why not set it up near our headquarters where we could supervise it properly? Because Hillsdale has something our headquarters location doesn't: an established community of tradespeople who still practice traditional methods, affordable real estate for expansion, and a local economy that would benefit tremendously from the investment. James was silent for a moment, considering his sister's points. You've always had good instincts for these things, Vicky, but this feels personal rather than strategic. Victoria's expression softened slightly. Maybe it is, a little. Bill Cooper taught me more than just how to build a desk in that shop class. He taught me to value craftsmanship and to respect the people who work with their hands. That's a lesson I've carried into our family business. Dad would agree with you there, James admitted. All right, develop the proposal, but the board will need to see clear benefits to Hamilton Construction, not just community goodwill. They'll get both, Victoria promised. The trades training center will address our skilled labor shortage while establishing Hamilton Construction as a leader in preserving traditional building arts. It's good business and good citizenship. After ending the call, Victoria turned her attention to the preliminary sketches her assistant had prepared based on her rough concept. The plans showed Davis Plumbing and Heating's building renovated and expanded, with classroom space, workshop areas, and modernized business facilities. Adjacent properties, currently part of Stewart's intended development area, were incorporated into the training center campus. Victoria made several notes on the drawings, then checked the time. She was due to meet with Mayor Thomas Bennett in 20 minutes to discuss the potential for municipal support for the project. The mayor had initially supported Stewart's development plan, but Victoria suspected he might be amenable to an alternative that provided jobs and educational opportunities rather than just retail space. As she gathered her materials for the meeting, Victoria's phone rang, a local number she didn't recognize. Victoria Hamilton. Ms. Hamilton, this is Richard Stewart. The voice was smoothly confident. I understand you've been making inquiries about properties in Hillsdale's downtown district. Victoria's expression cooled, though her voice remained professional. Mr. Stewart, yes, I've been exploring some potential opportunities in the area. I thought it might be helpful for us to meet, Stewart continued. I've been developing a comprehensive revitalization plan for downtown Hillsdale that's already quite advanced. Perhaps we could discuss how Hamilton Construction might participate rather than pursuing competing interests. The implied warning was clear, but Victoria had navigated far more intimidating negotiations in her career. I appreciate the invitation, Mr. Stewart, but my current focus is quite specific to skilled trades training rather than commercial development. Skilled trades training? Stewart's voice held a note of dismissive amusement. That's hardly the best use of prime commercial real estate. That's a matter of perspective, Victoria replied evenly. I believe investing in people's skills has long-term benefits that outweigh short-term retail profits. An admirable sentiment. Stewart's tone suggested he found it anything but. Nevertheless, I think you'll find that the town council is already committed to my vision for downtown. Several key properties have already been secured, but not all of them, Victoria observed. Davis Plumbing and Heating, for example. A brief silence followed. When Stewart spoke again, his voice had lost some of its smooth confidence. Michael, Davis is a stubborn man, clinging to a failing business. His situation has changed recently. I expect resolution on that property quite soon. Victoria's grip on her phone tightened. Interesting. I wasn't aware that a temporary health setback constituted a change in property ownership. Business is business, Miss Hamilton. Those who can't keep up inevitably get left behind, or those who offer predatory terms during vulnerable moments find themselves facing unexpected competition, Victoria countered. It was illuminating speaking. With you, Mr. Stewart, I look forward to presenting my proposal to the town council next week. Victoria ended the call, her resolve strengthened by the conversation. Richard Stewart clearly viewed Michael's health crisis as an opportunity to increase pressure on the struggling business owner. Time was now a critical factor in developing her alternative vision for Hillsdale's skilled trades future. At Michael's home, Olivia was preparing to return to her college classes, having arranged for Nancy Foster to check on her father daily. "Are you sure you'll be all right?" Olivia asked for the third time, hesitating by the door with her overnight bag. "I survived raising you on my own," Michael reminded her with a half-smile. "I think I can manage a few weeks of forced relaxation." Olivia wasn't convinced. "You've never been good at sitting still, Dad. Promise me you won't try to sneak into the shop or take on jobs while I'm gone." "Martin Fletcher and Tyler have things under control," Michael assured her. "And Nancy's already warned me she'll report back. To you if I misbehave." Olivia knelt beside his chair, suddenly serious. "I almost lost you, Dad. Please take this seriously." Michael's expression softened. He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind his daughter's ear, a gesture from her childhood that never failed to communicate his love. "I will live. I promise." After Olivia left, Michael sat alone in the quiet house, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, one of the few items he'd kept from his parents' home, marking the passing minutes. The forced inactivity left him too much time to think about the precarious state of his business, the loans he could barely service, and Richard Stewart's increasing pressure to sell the property. The temporary arrangement with Hamilton Construction would keep his client satisfied and bring in some income, but it was a stopgap measure at best. The fundamental problems remained: outdated equipment, rising costs, and increasing competition from larger companies that prioritized speed over craftsmanship. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding thoughts. Michael rose carefully and made his way to the entrance, surprised to find Bill Cooper standing on his porch, leaning heavily on his cane. "Bill," Michael greeted him, stepping back to allow the older man inside. "You shouldn't have walked all this way." "Needed the exercise," Bill insisted, though his labored breathing suggested otherwise. "Besides, couldn't let you sit here alone feeling sorry for yourself." Michael couldn't help but smile at the blunt assessment. "Come on in, coffee's fresh." In the kitchen, the two men settled at the small table where Michael had taught Olivia her multiplication tables and later helped with science projects. Bill studied his former student with a critical eye. "You look better. Still too pale, but better. Doctor says I'm on the mend. Just need rest." Michael poured coffee for them both. "How's the heating system working?" "Perfect. House hasn't been this comfortable in years." Bill wrapped his gnarled hands around the mug. "Victoria Hamilton tells me you've agreed to work with her company on some training materials." Michael raised an eyebrow. "You've been talking to Miss Hamilton about me?" "She's been asking questions about you, about other tradespeople in town. Seems very interested in traditional craftsmanship." "So she said," Michael acknowledged. "Hard to believe a company that size cares about old-school techniques." Bill shrugged. "Vicky was always different. Even as a teenager, she appreciated doing things right, not just fast." He sipped his coffee. "She mentioned Stuart's been pressuring you to sell." Michael's expression tightened. "Stuart wants the whole block for his development. Keeps making offers, each one lower than the last. Says he's doing me a favor since the business is clearly failing." "And is it failing?" The direct question, delivered without judgment, momentarily silenced Michael. Bill Cooper had never been one to sidestep difficult truths, either as a teacher or a friend. "Not failing," Michael said finally, "but not thriving either. Equipment needs updating, building needs repairs I can't afford right now, and with these medical bills coming..." He trailed off, unwilling to voice his deepest fears even to Bill. Bill nodded, understanding the unspoken concerns. "Stuart was at the town council meeting last night, talking about economic revitalization and modernizing outdated businesses, meaning replacing local shops with chain stores," Michael translated bitterly. "That was my take," Bill agreed. "But Victoria Hamilton was there too, asked some pointed questions about training programs for young people, retention of skilled workers in the community." This information surprised Michael. "She didn't mention attending council meetings. She doesn't waste words," Bill noted, "but she listens, really listens." He fixed Michael with a knowing look. "You should hear what she's proposing, Mike, with an open mind." Michael frowned. "I've already agreed to the temporary arrangement while I recover. I think she's got bigger ideas than that." Bill rose slowly from the table, his artificial knee audibly clicking with the movement. "Just saying, sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Pride's a poor substitute for survival." The old veteran's words lingered in Michael's mind long after he'd left. Bill Cooper had never been one for unnecessary conversation, which made his deliberate visit all the more significant. He clearly believed Victoria Hamilton represented an opportunity Michael should seriously consider. As evening settled over, Hillsdale, Victoria Hamilton, stood at the window of her hotel room, looking out at the small town with its mixture of historic buildings and newer commercial development. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martin Fletcher. "First day complete. Client satisfied. Tyler has potential. Documentation begun." Victoria smiled slightly, pleased that the initial phase of her plan was proceeding smoothly. Her meeting with Mayor Bennett had been promising as well. Though initially skeptical, the mayor had shown increasing interest as Victoria outlined the potential economic and educational benefits of a trades training center in downtown Hillsdale. The next phase would be more challenging, convincing Michael Davis that his struggling business could be transformed into something that preserved his legacy while securing his future. From what she'd learned about the stubborn plumber, that would require more than logical arguments or financial incentives. It would require appealing to the values he held most dear: craftsmanship, integrity, and creating opportunities for the next generation. Victoria turned from the window and returned to the draft proposal on her laptop. The Trades Training Center was taking shape, not just as a business venture, but as a vision for preserving skills that were in danger of being lost to time and progress. But first, she needed to convince a proud man to see beyond his immediate circumstances to a future he might never have imagined for himself. 1 week into his mandatory rest period, Michael Davis was going stir-crazy. The walls of his modest home seemed to close in a little more each day. The regular reports from Martin Fletcher about completed jobs provided some relief, but not being able to see the work himself, to feel the tools in his hands, was a special kind of torture for a man who had defined himself by his trade for over 30 years. The doorbell rang, offering a welcome interruption to his restless thoughts. Michael opened the door to find Victoria Hamilton standing on his porch, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm and a determined expression on her face. "Ms. Hamilton," he greeted her, unable to hide his surprise. "I wasn't expecting you." "Victoria, please," she reminded him. "May I come in? I have something important to discuss with you." Michael stepped back, allowing her entry. "Martin's been keeping me updated on the jobs. Everything seems to be going well." "It is," Victoria confirmed as she followed him to the living room. "Martin speaks highly of your apprentice, Tyler. Says the boy has good instincts." Pride flickered across Michael's face. "Tyler's a natural. Came to me 3 years ago. Couldn't tell a wrench from a screwdriver. Now he can diagnose most common plumbing issues by sound alone. That kind of mentorship is increasingly rare," Victoria observed, taking the seat Michael offered, "which is partly why I'm here today." Michael settled into his recliner, curiosity overcoming his usual reticence. "What's on your mind?" Victoria placed her portfolio on the coffee table between them. "I have a proposal for you, Michael, one that goes beyond our current arrangement." She opened the portfolio and removed several large renderings, spreading them out where Michael could see them clearly. He leaned forward, his expression shifting from polite interest to focused attention as he realized what he was looking at. "This is my shop," he said, studying the first drawing. "But expanded?" "Yes, renovated and expanded into what could become the Hillsdale Center for Trades Education." The renderings showed Davis Plumbing and Heating transformed. The storefront, preserved but restored to its original 1920s appearance. The workshop area behind it expanded into a modern training facility with multiple workstations. A second floor added above the current structure, with classrooms and office space adjacent. Properties incorporated into a campus-like setting. "What exactly am I looking at here?" Michael asked, his voice careful, neutral. "A vision for the future," Victoria answered simply. "A dedicated training center for the building trades, with particular emphasis on restoration techniques for historical systems, the very skills that are becoming increasingly rare and valuable." Michael's gaze remained fixed on the drawings. "And my shop is at the center of this because you represent exactly what the center would aim to preserve and promote: craftsmanship, traditional techniques, practical knowledge, passed from one generation to the next." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Hamilton Construction would provide funding for the renovation and expansion, equipment updates, and operating costs for the first 5 years. In exchange for your expertise, your participation as a master instructor, your commitment to developing a curriculum that truly prepares the next generation of tradespeople." Michael sat back, overwhelmed by the scale of what Victoria was proposing. "This is a lot to take in." "I understand," Victoria acknowledged. "It would be a significant change from your current operation, but it would also secure the future of Davis Plumbing and Heating in a way that honors its history while ensuring its relevance for decades to come." Michael's expression remained guarded. "Why Hillsdale? Why my shop? Hamilton Construction operates throughout the state. You could set up something like this anywhere." Victoria considered her answer carefully. 3 reasons. First, Hillsdale has a concentration of tradespeople still practicing traditional methods. Yourself, Edward Wilson in carpentry, the Murphy brothers in masonry. Second, the location is ideal, central to several communities that have lost vocational training programs in recent years. And third, she paused. "I believe in investing in places and people that have demonstrated the values our company was founded on. What you did for Bill Cooper exemplifies those values." Michael stood abruptly, moving to the window to create some distance from Victoria and her compelling vision. "This sounds more like charity than a business venture." "It's neither," Victoria countered. "It's strategic investment. Hamilton Construction spends millions annually recruiting and training skilled tradespeople. This center would develop a steady pipeline of properly trained workers, familiar with both modern techniques and traditional craftsmanship, workers who would have priority placement on our projects." Michael turned to face her. "And what happens to my existing clients? The families and businesses that have relied on Davis Plumbing and Heating for generations. They continue to receive service, either through the training program as appropriate teaching cases or through a dedicated service division of the center." Victoria tapped one of the renderings. "We've incorporated that need into the design. Your business identity remains intact, enhanced rather than replaced." Michael returned to his seat, studying the drawings more closely. Despite his skepticism, he couldn't deny the appeal of what Victoria was proposing. A facility where he could focus on the aspects of his trade he loved most. The opportunity to pass on his knowledge to young people who might otherwise never learn these skills. Financial stability after years of struggling to keep his business afloat. "What about ownership?" he asked finally. "Who would control this center?" "A board consisting of representatives from Hamilton Construction, participating master tradespeople, and local educational institutions," Victoria explained. "With you as lead instructor for the Plumbing and Heating Division, holding a permanent seat on that board." The thoughtfulness of the proposal was impressive. Victoria had clearly anticipated his concerns and incorporated solutions into her plan. Still, decades of independent operation made Michael hesitant to commit to such a radical change. "I'd need time to consider something like this," he said, "to discuss it with Olivia, with my attorney." "Of course," Victoria agreed immediately. "Take whatever time you need. The renderings are for you to keep, along with this preliminary proposal." She removed a bound document from her portfolio and placed it on the table. "All the details are in there: financial projections, governance structure, transition plan for your existing business." Michael nodded, somewhat relieved that she wasn't pressing for an immediate answer. "And Richard Stewart, he's been quite determined to acquire my property." A hint of steel entered Victoria's expression. "Mr. Stewart's development plans are not aligned with our vision for Hillsdale. Hamilton Construction has secured options on several adjacent properties to ensure the viability of the training center concept." This revelation startled Michael. "You've already been buying property?" "Securing options, not buying outright," Victoria clarified, "contingent on the center moving forward. We believe in preparing thoroughly." Before Michael could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, Hillsdale General Hospital, and felt a flutter of concern. "Excuse me, I should take this." He answered, listening for a moment before his expression shifted to alarm. "Is he all right?" "Yes, of course, I'll be right." "There." He ended the call and looked at Victoria, momentarily forgetting their discussion. "Bill Cooper's been admitted to the hospital. Pneumonia." Victoria immediately stood. "I'll drive you." Michael started to refuse, then remembered that his doctor had forbidden him from driving for at least 2 weeks. "Thank you. Let me just grab my coat." The drive to Hillsdale General passed in concerned silence. Pneumonia in a man of Bill's age, with his medical history, was serious. Michael stared out the window, thinking of the gruff shop teacher who had shown patience with a restless teenager's questions, who had recognized and encouraged Michael's affinity for mechanical systems when others had dismissed him as a troublemaker. In the hospital, they found Bill in a private room, oxygen tubes in his nose and monitoring equipment beeping steadily beside his bed. Despite his obvious weakness, the old veteran managed a faint smile when he saw them. Mike, Vicky, quite a fuss. Over an old man's chest cold. Michael moved to the bedside. "Pneumonia isn't a chest cold, Bill. What happened?" "Woke up feeling lousy, tried to tough it out." Bill's breath rattled slightly as he spoke. "Mrs. Winters found me when she brought over a casserole, called the ambulance." "The doctor says you weren't running your heat," Victoria said, her tone gently accusatory. "The house was 60 degrees when the paramedics arrived." Bill looked away, embarrassment evident beneath his gruff exterior. "System's working fine, just trying to keep the bill manageable." Michael and Victoria exchanged glances, understanding immediately. Despite having a functioning heating system, Bill had been keeping his thermostat at dangerously low levels to save on heating costs. "Bill, for God's sake," Michael admonished, though without heat. "The whole point of fixing your system was so you could be comfortable." "Comfort's expensive," Bill replied simply. "Social Security only goes so far." The statement hung in the air, a stark reminder of the challenges many elderly residents faced, even those who had worked hard their entire lives. A nurse entered to check Bill's vital signs, and Michael stepped back to give her room, finding himself beside Victoria near the door. "I didn't realize his financial situation was so precarious," Victoria said quietly. "Many people in Hillsdale are in the same position," Michael replied. "Fixed incomes that don't keep pace with rising costs. It's why I do what I can to help. Reduced rates, payment plans, sometimes free work when it's necessary." Victoria studied him thoughtfully. That commitment to community is something corporate America has largely forgotten. It's refreshing to see it in practice, even if it's made your own business situation more challenging. Michael shrugged slightly. "It's how my father ran the shop, how his father ran it before him. You take care of your neighbors because someday you might need them to take care of you." When the nurse finished her checks and left, they returned to Bill's bedside. The brief interaction seemed to have tired him, his eyes drooping despite his efforts to remain alert. "You should rest," Victoria told him gently. "We'll come back tomorrow." Bill nodded, but reached out to grasp Michael's wrist with surprising strength. "Did you look at Vicky's proposal for the training center?" Michael blinked in surprise. "You knew about that?" "Course I did. Who do you think suggested you as the cornerstone instructor?" Bill's gaze was suddenly sharp, piercing despite his illness. "It's a good idea, Mike, the kind that comes along once in a lifetime." "We can discuss this later," Michael said, uncomfortable having the conversation with Bill in his current state. "Might not be a later," Bill retorted with blunt pragmatism. "I'm not getting any younger, and neither are you. That heart scare of yours should have made that clear. Bill, just listen for once, would you? I spent 40 years teaching kids to work with their hands, watching those programs get cut one by one, watching skills that built this country get dismissed as obsolete." Bill's voice strengthened with conviction, despite his weakened state. "This center could change that, could give kids like Tyler a real future, but it needs people like you to make it happen." The passion in the old veteran's voice silenced Michael's objections. He squeezed Bill's hand gently. I hear you. Get some. Rest now, all right? We'll talk more when you're feeling better. Bill seemed satisfied with this concession, allowing his eyes to close. Within moments, his breathing had settled into the rhythm of sleep, though the slight wheeze remained a concerning reminder of his condition. In the hospital corridor, Michael ran a hand over his face, the emotional weight of seeing his mentor so diminished, adding to his already considerable stress. "He's right, you know," Victoria said quietly as they walked toward the exit, "about the opportunity the center represents, not just for you, but for Hillsdale." Michael sighed. Bill's always been able to see the bigger picture. It's what made him such a good teacher. "And what about you?" Victoria asked. "Can you see it too?" Michael stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "I see a lot of things, Victoria. I see a business my grandfather started being transformed into something he might not recognize. I see the risks of partnering with a large corporation that might change direction at the first sign of economic trouble. I see myself moving from independent business owner to employee. Those are legitimate concerns," Victoria acknowledged. "But is there nothing in the vision that appeals to you? Nothing that resonates with what you value most?" The question struck at the heart of Michael's internal conflict, because there was indeed much about the proposal that appealed to him deeply: the focus on preserving traditional skills, the opportunity to teach a new generation, the stability it would provide for his own future and potentially Olivia's. "I need to think," he said finally, "and to discuss it with my daughter. This affects her too. It's her inheritance I'd be changing." Victoria nodded. "Of course. I'll be in Hillsdale for 3 more days before I need to return to headquarters. Take that time to consider the proposal. Talk to Olivia, to your attorney, to anyone whose opinion you value." As they left the hospital and returned to Victoria's car, Michael found himself looking at Hillsdale through new eyes. The small town had changed significantly during his lifetime, not always for the better. Shops that had been local institutions had closed, unable to compete with big-box stores on the outskirts. Young people left for opportunities elsewhere, rarely returning. The skilled trades that had once been the backbone of the community were increasingly undervalued and underpaid. Could the training center Victoria proposed really change that trajectory? And was he willing to set aside his independence, his familiar way of doing business, to be part of that change? The questions followed Michael home, where he found himself studying the renderings Victoria had left, imagining the possibilities they represented, not just for himself, but for Tyler, for future apprentices, and for a town that desperately needed economic revitalization that didn't come at the cost of its character and history. That evening, Michael called Olivia, the one person whose opinion truly mattered in this decision. As he explained Victoria's proposal, he found himself presenting both sides with careful objectivity, wanting his daughter to form her own conclusions rather than be influenced by his conflicted feelings. "It's a lot to process, Dad," Olivia said when he finished. "But it sounds like an amazing opportunity, the kind that aligns perfectly with what you've always valued most about your work. It would change everything, Liv. The business wouldn't be the same. Maybe it would be better," Olivia suggested gently. "You've been working yourself to exhaustion, trying to keep the shop going the traditional way. Maybe this is the evolution. It needs to survive and thrive." Michael was silent, considering her words. "I always thought you'd take over someday, become the 4th generation of Davis Plumbing and Heating." Olivia's soft laugh carried through the phone. "Dad, we both know that's not my path. I love you, and I respect your work more than I can say, but my future is in engineering, not plumbing." "And you're sure about that?" "Because if this goes forward, there might not be a traditional family business to return to." "I'm sure," Olivia confirmed, "and I think Grandpa would be sure too. He always said the most important thing was leaving the world better than you found it." This center could do that, could preserve everything that matters about Davis Plumbing and Heating while creating something new and valuable for Hillsdale. After they said their goodbyes, Michael sat in his quiet living room, Olivia's perspective, adding new dimensions to his thinking. She was right about her grandfather. Harold Davis had been a forward-thinking man, despite his traditional trade, always looking for ways to improve his craft and pass it on more effectively. The renderings on the coffee table seemed to gain substance and possibility as Michael studied them again. The preservation of the original storefront, the modernized workshop spaces, the classrooms where a new generation could learn not just the mechanics of plumbing and heating systems, but the problem-solving and craftsmanship that separated true tradespeople from mere parts replacers. For the first time since Victoria had presented her proposal, Michael allowed himself to imagine being part of it. Teaching classes on historical system restoration, mentoring apprentices like Tyler in a proper educational setting, creating a legacy that extended beyond his own family to benefit an entire community. The vision was compelling, even exhilarating. But was it realistic? Or was it simply an elaborate dream that would collapse under the weight of corporate priorities and bottom-line thinking? The answer, Michael realized, lay not just in the proposal itself, but in the character of the woman behind it. Victoria Hamilton had demonstrated considerable integrity in her dealings so far. Her concern for Bill Cooper seemed genuine. Her appreciation for craftsmanship appeared deeply held rather than merely strategic. But could he trust that enough to fundamentally change the course of a business that had been in his family for 3 generations? As Michael finally prepared for bed, his doctor's admonishment to avoid stress seemed almost laughable in light of the decision he now faced. Yet somehow, the prospect of transforming Davis Plumbing and Heating into something new and potentially more impactful didn't feel as threatening as it had when Victoria first presented it, perhaps because, at its core, the proposal honored rather than dismissed the values that had always defined his approach to his trade. Tomorrow, he decided, he would visit Bill Cooper in the hospital again. And perhaps, after that, he would be ready to give Victoria Hamilton his answer. The following morning, Michael Davis sat in Bill Cooper's hospital room, watching the rise and fall of the old veteran's chest. The medical staff had reported improvement. Overnight, the antibiotics were working, the oxygen levels slowly rising. But seeing his former teacher so frail, so vulnerable, drove home the reality of time's passage in a way that Michael's own recent health scare somehow hadn't. You going to stare at me all day? Or are we going to talk? Bill's raspy voice startled Michael from his thoughts. Just making sure you're still breathing, old man, Michael replied, falling into the comfortable pattern of gruff affection they'd established over decades. Bill adjusted his position slightly, wincing at the effort. Talked to Victoria Hamilton yet? Not since yesterday. I've been thinking about her proposal. And, Michael hesitated, it's an opportunity I never imagined would come along. But it's also a major risk, giving up independence for a corporate partnership no matter how well-intentioned. Bill's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. You always were cautious, even in shop class. Measuring twice, 3 times sometimes before making a cut. You taught me that. Taught you to be careful, not paralyzed, Bill countered. Sometimes you have to trust your judgment and move forward. A soft knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Victoria Hamilton stood in the doorway, a small potted plant in her hands. I hope I'm not intruding, she said. I wanted to check on Bill. Come in, Vicky, Bill called, his voice stronger than it had been moments before. Mike and I were just discussing your training center idea. Victoria entered, placing the plant on the bedside table before taking the room's other chair. How are you feeling today? Better. Doctors say I can go home in a couple of days if I keep improving. Bill fixed her with a direct look. But we need to talk about what happens then. Victoria nodded, understanding immediately. You're concerned about managing at home. I'm concerned about heating bills, Bill corrected bluntly. No point pretending. Otherwise, that's why the house was cold enough to make me sick in the first place. Michael shifted uncomfortably. As a plumber, he could fix Bill's heating system, but he couldn't make energy costs more affordable on a fixed income. Victoria, however, didn't seem discomforted by Bill's frankness. Actually, I've been thinking about that issue, not just for you, but for other fixed-income residents in Hillsdale. Both men looked at her expectantly. Hamilton Construction has been developing a residential energy efficiency program, Victoria explained. Targeted upgrades that significantly reduce heating and cooling costs for older homes. We've implemented it in 3 communities so far, with average energy savings of 37%. Sounds expensive, Bill commented skeptically. The initial installation costs are offset by energy savings within 3 to 5 years, Victoria acknowledged. But we've been exploring a subsidy model for low-income and fixed-income homeowners, potentially in partnership with utility companies and state energy efficiency grants. Michael studied Victoria with growing interest. This was the first he'd heard of such a program, and it addressed a problem he encountered regularly with elderly clients like Bill. Would Hillsdale qualify for something like that? He asked. Victoria met his gaze directly. It could, especially if we had a local partner with expertise in heating systems and a reputation for quality work. Someone who could train others to implement the program correctly. The implication was clear, and Michael found himself nodding slowly as pieces clicked into place. The training center Victoria proposed wouldn't just prepare young people for traditional employment in the trades. It could also serve as a hub for innovative programs addressing real community needs. You've put a lot of thought into this, Michael. Observed. I have, Victoria confirmed, because this isn't just about business for me. It's about creating sustainable solutions that benefit communities while preserving valuable skills and knowledge. Bill looked between them, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth despite his illness. Sounds like you two might be on the same page after all. Before Michael could respond, the door opened again to admit Richard Stewart, looking distinctly out of place in the hospital setting with his tailored suit and calculated smile. "Bill, heard you were under the weather," Stewart greeted with manufactured concern. His smile faltered slightly when he noticed Michael and Victoria. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." "Richard," Bill acknowledged coolly, "what brings you to my sickbed?" Stewart held up a gift bag, emblazoned with the logo of a local gourmet shop. "Just bringing some get-well wishes from the Chamber of Commerce." He placed the bag on the bedside table, then turned to Victoria with a tight smile. "Ms. Hamilton, I didn't expect to see you here." "Mr. Stewart," Victoria replied evenly. "Bill was one of my most influential teachers. I make a point of visiting when I'm in town." Stewart's gaze shifted to Michael. "And Mr. Davis, shouldn't you be resting after your episode? I heard your business has been temporarily taken over by outsiders. The deliberate mischaracterization of the arrangement with Hamilton Construction raised Michael's hackles. My business is operating smoothly with qualified assistance while I recover. Thank you for your concern." Stewart's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, though managing client relationships from a distance can be challenging. "I understand several of your regular commercial customers have been inquiring about more permanent service arrangements. The implication that clients were abandoning Davis Plumbing and Heating hung in the air like a challenge. Michael felt a flush of anger, but before he could respond, Victoria spoke. "How interesting that you'd have that information, Mr. Stewart. I wasn't aware that real estate development included monitoring local business-client relationships." Stewart's composure slipped momentarily. I keep my ear to the ground regarding all aspects of Hillsdale's business community. It helps inform development decisions. I'm sure it does, Victoria agreed with deceptive mildness. Just as Hamilton Construction researches local business ethics before considering community investments. The subtle warning in her words wasn't lost on Stewart. His smile became even more forced. Well, I should let Bill rest. I have a meeting with Mayor Bennett about the downtown revitalization project. He nodded curtly to the group. Good day. After Stewart left, Bill gave a dry chuckle that turned into a brief coughing fit. When he recovered, he fixed Michael with a meaningful look. That man has been trying to get his hands on your property for 2 years. Now he's spreading rumors about your clients jumping ship. Michael nodded grimly. I caught that. Typical Stewart. Tactics create uncertainty, then swoop in with a lowball offer when people are vulnerable. It appears Mr. Stewart is concerned about competition for his development vision, Victoria observed, her tone thoughtful rather than alarmed. Which suggests he considers our training center concept a viable threat. Our training center? Michael repeated, catching the choice of words. Victoria met his gaze steadily. Yes, our training center, if you decide to move forward with the partnership. Bill looked between them expectantly. Well, Mike, Victoria needs an answer soon. What's it going to be? Michael felt the weight of the moment, the convergence of personal history, community need, and future possibility. Stewart's appearance had clarified something important. There were really only 2 paths forward for downtown Hillsdale. One led to generic development that would erase the town's character and history. The other offered preservation of traditional craftsmanship while creating new opportunities for the next generation. I need to see the shop first, Michael said finally. Need to stand in the space and really envision what you're proposing before I can commit. Victoria nodded, understanding immediately. Of course, whenever you're ready. Today, Michael decided. I've been cleared for short outings as long as I don't overexert myself. I'll drive you after visiting hours, Victoria offered. Bill reached out to grasp Michael's wrist, much as he had the day before. Sometimes the best way to honor tradition is to help it evolve, Mike. Your grandfather understood that. He'd be proud to see the shop become something that carries his values forward. The simple statement coming from someone who had known Harold Davis carried more weight than all of Victoria's detailed proposals and financial projections. Michael nodded, acknowledging the truth in Bill's words. That afternoon, Victoria drove Michael to Davis Plumbing and Heating for the first time since his collapse. The familiar red brick building with its faded sign looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way he hadn't noticed before. Perhaps because he was seeing it through new eyes, not just as his present livelihood, but as a potential cornerstone for a very different future. Tyler Adams was behind the counter when they entered, surprise and then concern crossing his young face at the sight of his boss. Mr. Davis, should you be up and around? Michael waved off the concern. Just a short visit, Tyler. Wanted to check in, see how things are going with Martin. Really well, actually, Tyler enthused. He's been teaching me diagnostic techniques I've never seen before, and we've completed every job on schedule, even Mrs. Thompson's complicated radiator repair. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Martin Fletcher emerged from the workshop area, wiping his hands on a shop towel. Michael, good to see you on your feet. He nodded respectfully to Victoria. Ms. Hamilton. Martin. How's the documentation? Coming along? Victoria inquired. Very well. I've completed detailed materials on 3 restoration projects so far, with Michael's systems as the reference standard. Martin's genuine respect was evident in his tone. The craftsmanship in some of these older installations is remarkable. Techniques that aren't taught anymore but should be. The sincere appreciation for his work from a fellow master tradesman touched Michael more deeply than he expected. It affirmed something he'd always believed, but rarely heard acknowledged. That there was genuine artistry in proper plumbing and heating installation, a standard of excellence worth preserving. "Mind if I look around?" Michael asked, already moving toward the workshop where he'd spent most of his adult life. The space was meticulously organized, even more so than usual, with tools arranged by function and materials neatly stored. A corner workbench had been cleared to create what appeared to be a documentation station, with a computer, camera, and detailed diagrams of several historical heating systems. "Tyler's idea," Martin explained, following Michael's gaze, "said it would be more efficient to have a dedicated area for the documentation work." Michael nodded, impressed with his apprentice's initiative. Smart thinking. He moved through the familiar space, running his hand along workbenches his grandfather had built, tools he'd inherited from his father, equipment he'd purchased over the years as the business evolved. Each item carried memories, represented skills passed down through generations. "It's a good shop," Martin observed quietly, "built for actual work, not just for show. You can tell it's been shaped by people who understand the trade." 3 generations. "Worth," Michael confirmed, a hint of pride in his voice. He continued his circuit of the shop, eventually reaching the storage room at the back, a cluttered space filled with parts accumulated over decades, many for systems no longer in common use. This room, more than any other, represented both the strength and the limitation of Davis Plumbing and Heating. The inventory allowed Michael to repair vintage systems that other plumbers wouldn't touch, but maintaining it tied up capital that could have been invested in modernizing other aspects of the business. Victoria had followed silently, allowing Michael the space to reacquaint himself with his domain and process his thoughts. Now she spoke carefully. In the training center concept, this inventory would become a teaching resource, catalogued, organized, and used to train students in historical system repair. Michael nodded, seeing the possibility. The parts that represented financial burden, as individual inventory, could become valuable educational assets as part of a training program. "Let me show you the renderings in the actual space," Victoria suggested. "It might help you visualize how the renovation would work." They returned to the front of the shop, where Victoria spread the architectural drawings across the counter. With the physical space around them, the renderings took on new dimension and practicality. Michael could see how the existing structure would be preserved while being enhanced, how the workshop would expand into a proper teaching facility, how his grandfather's vision of quality craftsmanship could evolve into something with broader impact. "The original storefront would be fully restored," Victoria explained, pointing to details in the drawings. "The Davis Plumbing and Heating sign would remain, complemented by the Hillsdale Center for Trades Education designation." As they discussed the specifics of the proposal, Tyler listened with increasing excitement, occasionally asking questions that revealed his grasp of the opportunity this represented. "Would apprentices like me be able to complete certifications through the center?" he asked. "I've been saving for classes at the community college, but they're 40 miles away." "That's exactly the need we'd be addressing," Victoria confirmed. "Local, accessible, high-quality trades education with direct mentorship from master craftspeople." Tyler turned to Michael, his expression earnest. "This could be amazing, Mr. Davis. Think of how many kids like me could benefit." The simple statement, free of complex business considerations or financial projections, cut to the heart of what mattered most. Michael had always found his greatest satisfaction in teaching Tyler, in passing on knowledge that might otherwise be lost. The training center would multiply that impact many times over. Michael looked around the shop once more, seeing not just what it had been, but what it could become. The decision that had seemed so difficult yesterday now felt surprisingly clear. "If we do this," he said to Victoria, "I have conditions." "I expected nothing less," she replied, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "Name them." quality never gets compromised for profit. Not in the teaching, not in the client work. Agreed, that's a foundational principle. Tyler gets a full scholarship to complete his certification, with a guaranteed position afterward if he wants it. Tyler's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. Absolutely, Victoria nodded. He'd be an ideal candidate for the program. And Bill Cooper gets comprehensive energy efficiency upgrades at no cost as a pilot case for the program you mentioned. Victoria's smile broadened. I was hoping you'd suggest that. It would provide an excellent teaching opportunity while helping someone who's contributed tremendously to this community. Michael extended his hand. Then I think we have the beginnings of an agreement. As they shook hands, sealing the preliminary commitment, the bell above the shop door jingled. Richard Stewart entered, his confident stride faltering slightly when he saw the gathering at the counter. Well, this is unexpected, Stewart remarked, recovering quickly. Michael, I heard you were still recuperating. And Ms. Hamilton, twice in one day. Hillsdale is a small town, isn't it? Michael straightened, drawing himself to his full height despite the lingering fatigue from his health issues. What can I do for you, Richard? Stewart glanced at the architectural renderings spread across the counter, his expression sharpening. With interest. Just thought I'd stop by to discuss my latest offer for the property. Given your health situation, I thought you might be reconsidering your position. I appreciate your concern, Michael replied evenly. But as you can see, we're actually discussing expansion plans, not closure. Stewart's practiced smile slipped. Expansion? That seems ambitious given the current state of your business. It's actually a complete reimagining, Victoria interjected smoothly. The Hillsdale Center for Trades Education, with Davis Plumbing and Heating as its cornerstone. We'll be announcing the partnership formally next week. The color drained slightly from Stewart's face as he processed this information. A partnership? With Hamilton Construction, a partnership that will revitalize this block while preserving its historical character and creating educational opportunities for the community, Victoria confirmed. Mayor Bennett has already expressed preliminary support for the concept. Stewart's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I see, that's quite a pivot from our discussions about modernizing downtown. The mayor seemed quite committed to my vision. Just last week, visions evolve when better alternatives emerge, Victoria replied pleasantly, especially ones that create jobs while honoring a community's heritage. Stewart looked between Victoria and Michael, calculation evident in his expression. This seems rather sudden. Perhaps we should all take some time to consider the various options for downtown development. I'd be happy to present my complete proposal alongside Ms. Hamilton's at the next town council meeting. The partnership is already moving forward, Michael stated firmly. Davis Plumbing and Heating isn't available for your development, Richard. Never was, really. Stewart's practiced charm vanished entirely, replaced by barely concealed frustration. You're making a mistake, Michael. Hamilton Construction is using you as a feel-good story to gain a foothold in Hillsdale. Once they've established themselves, what happens to your little shop then? What happens when their corporate priorities change? That's enough, Mr. Stewart. Victoria's voice was steel beneath silk. Your development model focuses on short-term profit at the expense of community. Character. Ours invests in people and skills that will strengthen Hillsdale for generations. I think we both know which approach has sustainability on its side. Stewart straightened his tie, visibly regrouping. Well, I admire your optimism. But business is business, and sentimentality rarely survives the bottom line. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. When this falls apart, Michael, my offer will still stand, though perhaps not at the same level. After Stewart's departure, the tension in the shop gradually dissipated, replaced by a tentative excitement as the reality of the decision began to sink in. He's not going to give up easily, Michael observed, watching Stewart's retreating figure through the shop window. No, he won't, Victoria agreed. But neither will we, and we have something he doesn't. A vision that benefits Hillsdale. rather than simply extracting value from it. Tyler looked between them, youthful enthusiasm breaking through his usual reserve. "So, this is really happening. We're going to build a trades training center." Michael smiled at his apprentice's excitement. "Looks that way. Think you're up for helping train the next generation?" "Absolutely." Tyler's face lit up. "I can start organizing the teaching materials Martin and I have been documenting, and maybe design some basic training modules for beginners." "One step at a time," Michael cautioned, though his own excitement was building. "We have a lot of details to work out first." Victoria gathered the renderings from the counter, sliding them carefully back into her portfolio. "I'll have the legal team prepare the formal partnership agreement based on the conditions we've discussed. In the meantime, I suggest we meet with Mayor Bennett together to present the unified concept." Michael nodded, feeling a surprising sense of rightness about the decision. What had seemed an impossible choice days earlier now felt like an inevitable evolution, not an ending but a new beginning for everything he valued most about his trade and his family's legacy. "I should get you home," Victoria said, noting Michael's increasing fatigue. "You're still recovering and we have a busy few weeks ahead." As they prepared to leave, Tyler approached Michael somewhat hesitantly. "Mr. Davis, thank you for thinking of me in all this. It means a lot." Michael clasped the young man's shoulder. "You earned it, Tyler, and I'm counting on you to help make this transition work." The simple exchange, more than any formal agreement or architectural rendering, cemented Michael's commitment to the partnership with Hamilton Construction. Because ultimately, this wasn't about buildings or business models. It was about people, about Bill Cooper, whose teaching had shaped generations of skilled workers, about Tyler Adams, whose potential deserved the opportunity to fully develop, about the countless young people who might find purpose and pride in the trades if given the proper guidance and respect. And perhaps, Michael admitted to himself as Victoria drove him home through the familiar streets of Hillsdale, it was also about his own legacy, about creating something more enduring than even the most expertly installed plumbing system, something that would continue to serve the community long after he was gone. The transformation of Davis Plumbing and Heating was underway, not as a surrender to changing times, but as an affirmation that some values, craftsmanship, integrity, knowledge, passed from hand to hand, remained worth preserving, no matter how the world around them changed. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity that transformed both Davis Plumbing and Heating and Michael's perspective on his future. Each day brought new developments as the training center concept evolved from architectural renderings to concrete plans with community support. Mayor Bennett, initially cautious about abandoning Stewart's development proposal, had become an enthusiastic advocate after seeing the potential economic and educational benefits of the Trades Training Center. The town council voted 6-1 to provide tax incentives and expedited permitting for the project, with only Councilwoman Helen Palmer, Richard, Stewart's cousin by marriage, opposing. Michael's cardiac recovery progressed steadily, allowing him to increase his involvement in the planning process, while still respecting Dr. Wilson's limitations on physical exertion. The forced slowdown, which had initially frustrated him, now seemed almost providential, giving him time to focus on the broader vision rather than daily operational details. Bill Cooper had recovered sufficiently to return home, where he'd become an unofficial advisor to the Training Center Planning Committee, his decades of teaching experience providing invaluable insights into curriculum development and instructional approaches. The energy efficiency upgrades to his home were already underway, with Tyler and Martin documenting each step as a case study for future training programs. On a crisp autumn morning, Michael stood in front of Davis Plumbing and Heating, watching. as a team of surveyors took precise measurements of the property and adjacent lots. The site evaluation represented the first tangible step toward the physical transformation of his family's business into something new and expansive. Exciting, isn't it? Victoria Hamilton approached from her parked car, coffee cups in hand. She offered one to Michael, who accepted it gratefully. The morning chill had an increasing bite as October deepened toward November. "It's starting to feel real," Michael acknowledged, sipping the coffee, prepared exactly as he preferred it, he noted. Victoria's attention to detail extended to all aspects of their growing professional relationship. "The architect will have updated renderings by next week, incorporating the suggestions from our community feedback sessions." Victoria nodded toward the surveyors, "And the structural assessment team reports that the building is fundamentally sound. Good bones, as they say. Your grandfather built to last." "He'd be pleased to hear that," Michael said, a note of pride in his voice. "Though I still wonder what he'd think about all this." He gestured to encompass the planned expansion. Victoria considered the question thoughtfully. "Based on what you and Bill have told me about him, I think he'd recognize that. Craftsmanship evolves but doesn't disappear. The tools change, the materials advance, but the fundamental commitment to quality work remains the same." It was a perspective Michael had been gradually embracing over the past weeks. His initial fears about corporate priorities overriding craftsmanship had eased as he worked more closely with Victoria and her team. The partnership agreement, finalized and signed 3 days earlier, included explicit protections for the teaching methodologies and quality standards that Michael had insisted upon. "Have you told Olivia about the official partnership?" Victoria asked. Michael nodded. "Called her yesterday. She's thrilled. Wants to incorporate some of our teaching modules into an engineering ethics course she's developing for next semester. Something about the importance of understanding how things are actually built, not just how they're designed." "Smart girl," Victoria observed with a smile. "That disconnect between design and implementation creates half the problems in the construction industry." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Linda Porter, the local reporter who had been covering the training center development with growing enthusiasm. Her initial skepticism had given way to genuine interest as the potential community benefits became clearer. "Mr. Davis, Ms. Hamilton," Linda greeted them, digital recorder in hand. "Mind if I ask a few follow-up questions for my feature article? The editor's given me the front page for Sunday's edition." "Front page?" Michael echoed, somewhat uncomfortable with the attention. "It's just a training center, not a skyscraper." Linda smiled. "It's a lot more than that to Hillsdale. 3 neighboring towns have already contacted the paper asking about potential participation, and the high school counselor says student interest in trades careers has spiked since news of the center broke." This information surprised Michael. "Already? We haven't even broken ground." "People respond to hope," Victoria said simply, "especially in communities that have seen too many young people leave for opportunities elsewhere." Linda's interview. Questions were thoughtful and substantive, focusing on the economic impact, educational approach, and timeline for the center's development. Michael found himself speaking with growing confidence about the vision he and Victoria had refined together, a vision that honored traditional craftsmanship while creating pathways for innovation and adaptation. "One last question," Linda said, checking her notes. "Richard Stewart made some pointed comments at yesterday's Chamber of Commerce meeting, suggesting that the training center concept is economically unsustainable and will ultimately fail without the commercial development he proposed. Any response to that?" Michael glanced at Victoria, who nodded slightly, indicating he should take the lead on this delicate topic. "Stewart's development model relies on replacing local businesses with corporate chains that extract wealth from the community," Michael replied, his voice steady. Our model invests in people and skills that remain in Hillsdale, creating value that circulates locally rather than flowing to distant shareholders. I know which approach I believe in for the long term." Linda nodded, apparently satisfied with the response. "Thank you both. The feature will run this Sunday. I think people are going to be excited about what you're building here, and I don't just mean the physical structure." After Linda departed, Michael and Victoria crossed the street to the diner for their now regular morning planning meeting. The owner, Alice Matthews, greeted them warmly, leading them to their booth by the window, with a view of Davis Plumbing and Heating across the street. "Coffee's fresh, and I've got that whole grain toast you like, Victoria," Alice said as they settled in. "The usual for you, Michael?" "Please," Michael confirmed, realizing how quickly new routines had established themselves in his life. 3 weeks ago, he would have been in his shop at this hour, already deep into the day's repairs. Now he was having strategic planning breakfasts with the CEO of Hamilton Construction, discussing curriculum development and community engagement. Once Alice had delivered their food and stepped away, Victoria pulled out her tablet, reviewing their agenda for the day. The legal team has secured options on both adjacent properties now. The owners were actually quite reasonable once they understood the project's community benefits. "And Stuart's reaction?" Michael asked, knowing the developer had been attempting to block their property acquisitions. "Predictably frustrated, his lawyers have been calling mine daily, looking for leverage points." Victoria's expression remained untroubled. "But our agreements are solid, and community sentiment is clearly in our favor." Michael nodded, relieved but not surprised. Victoria's methodical approach to the project had anticipated and addressed most potential obstacles before they became significant problems. "We should discuss the apprenticeship structure," Victoria continued, shifting topics smoothly. The advisory committee suggested 2 tracks, a basic certification program for entry-level trades workers and an advanced restoration specialization for those with existing experience. "That makes sense," Michael agreed. "Not everyone has the patience or inclination for historical system work, but those who do need in-depth training beyond standard certification." Their discussion of educational frameworks was interrupted by the arrival of Warren Fisher, Hillsdale's building inspector, who approached their table with an uncomfortable expression. "Michael, Ms. Hamilton, sorry to interrupt your breakfast, but I thought you should know." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Stewart's filed a complaint with the Historical Preservation Committee, claiming your renovation plans violate downtown design guidelines." Michael frowned. "That's ridiculous. We're preserving the original facade, not changing it." "I know that, and the committee probably will too, but it'll delay your permits while they review everything." Warren looked genuinely apologetic. "I've always tried to stay neutral in town business matters, but what Stewart's doing, it's not right. Using regulations as weapons against a project that benefits the community." Victoria thanked Warren for the heads up, her composure unruffled. "We've encountered similar tactics before. Would you mind sending me the specific citation he's using? Our architectural team can address any concerns proactively." After Warren left, Michael shook his head in frustration. "Stewart doesn't give up easily. He's used to getting his way through persistence and manipulation," Victoria observed, "but he's miscalculated this time. His obstructionist tactics are only increasing community support for our project." Victoria was right, Michael realized. Each of Stewart's attempts to undermine the training center had backfired, rallying additional supporters to their cause. The owner of the hardware store had offered discounted materials for the renovation. The high school shop teacher had volunteered to help develop introductory curricula. Even Howard Jensen, the bank manager who had once pressured Michael about his late mortgage payments, had approached them about financial literacy workshops for trade students. "It's strange," Michael mused. 3 weeks ago, I was worried about losing my family's legacy. Now it feels like we're building something that honors that legacy while creating something much bigger." Victoria smiled. "That's exactly what we're doing, preserving the past by making it relevant to the future." Their breakfast concluded with a review of the week's objectives, finalizing the curriculum framework, meeting with potential instructors from other trades, and preparing for the community open house scheduled for the following weekend. As he crossed back to Davis Plumbing and Heating, Michael caught sight of Richard Stewart, watching them from his office window across the street. The developer's expression was unreadable at this distance, but his sustained attention suggested he hadn't abandoned his opposition to their plans. "Stewart's still watching us," Michael noted quietly. Victoria followed his gaze and nodded. He's realizing that his usual tactics aren't working, which makes him dangerous. We need to be prepared for more direct confrontation. "What do you think he'll try next?" "Something personal, most likely. People like Stewart often resort to character attacks when their business maneuvers fail." Victoria's expression hardened slightly. "We should be ready to respond with transparency and facts, not emotion." Inside the shop, Tyler and Martin were conducting a training session with 3 high school students who had expressed interest in plumbing careers. The pilot program, organized with the school's cooperation, allowed the teenagers to earn academic credit while gaining hands-on experience with basic plumbing skills. "Mr. Davis," Tyler called out as they entered, "we're teaching pressure testing. Want to demonstrate the proper gauge reading technique?" Michael smiled at the young man's enthusiasm. In recent weeks, Tyler had blossomed from a quiet apprentice into a confident instructor in training, his natural teaching abilities emerging as he shared his knowledge with others. "Carry on, Tyler. You're doing fine." Michael gestured for the students to keep their attention on Tyler rather than himself. "Part of learning is figuring things out without the boss looking over your shoulder." The simple affirmation of confidence visibly bolstered Tyler's posture. He turned back to the students with renewed assurance, explaining the calibration techniques Michael had taught him 2 years earlier. Victoria observed the interaction with approval. "He's got real potential as an instructor." "He does," Michael agreed proudly. "The formal education we're building into the program will give him opportunities I never could have offered on my own." They made their way to Michael's office, which had gradually transformed into the planning headquarters for the training center. The walls, once adorned with supplier calendars and industry certification documents, now featured architectural renderings, curriculum flowcharts, and a growing list of community partners supporting the initiative. "I've asked Bill Cooper to join us this afternoon to review the draft curriculum," Victoria said as they settled into work. "His perspective on teaching methodology will be valuable." Michael nodded in agreement. "Bill's insight has already improved our approach. His emphasis on understanding principles rather than just techniques is something modern training often overlooks." Their morning proceeded with the now familiar rhythm of collaborative planning, each bringing their unique perspective to the challenges of creating an educational institution that balanced practical skills with deeper understanding of the trades. Around noon, Tyler knocked on the office door, his expression uncharacteristically concerned. "Mr. Davis, there's something you should see." He handed Michael a copy of Hillsdale's local paper, folded open to a half-page advertisement. The boldly headlined ad read, "Davis Plumbing and Heating, serving Hillsdale for 3 generations. Will corporate takeover end this legacy?" Below was a manipulated photo showing the shop with its sign removed, replaced by a generic Hamilton Construction Training Facility designation. The text went on to question whether Michael's health issues had impaired his judgment in surrendering a family legacy to outside interests. The advertisement was attributed to Citizens for Responsible Development, but the rhetoric clearly marked it as Stewart's work. Michael's jaw tightened as he read the misleading claims. "Stuart's getting desperate." Victoria reviewed the advertisement, her expression calculating rather than angry. "This actually gives us an opportunity to clarify the partnership publicly. Linda's feature article is timely. We should issue a direct response too," Michael suggested. "Maybe an open letter to the community." "Exactly what I was thinking," Victoria agreed. "Transparent, fact-based, focused on the community benefits. We'll address the misleading claims without giving them more attention than they deserve." Tyler, still hovering in the doorway, spoke up hesitantly. "Maybe I could help. Write something about what this opportunity means to younger tradespeople like me." Michael and Victoria exchanged approving glances. "That's an excellent idea, Tyler," Victoria encouraged. "Personal perspectives are powerful in countering manufactured controversies." As they began drafting their response strategy, Michael reflected on how fundamentally his outlook had changed. A month ago, he would have reacted to Stuart's tactics with angry defensiveness. Now he saw them as an opportunity to further clarify and strengthen their vision for the training center. The transformation wasn't just happening to his business, but to Michael himself, expanding his perspective from individual craftsmanship to community leadership, from preserving the past to actively shaping the future. All because he'd chosen to help an elderly veteran when it wasn't convenient or financially advantageous to do so. That seemingly small decision had opened doors Michael could never have anticipated, creating possibilities not just for himself, but for Tyler, for Bill, and for countless others who would benefit from the training center in years to come. And he was just getting started. 6 months later, a crisp spring morning dawned over Hillsdale, sunlight glinting off the newly restored facade of the Davis Plumbing and Heating building. The familiar red brick had been carefully cleaned and repointed, the original leaded glass transom window above the entrance restored to its 1920s glory. A new sign hung alongside the carefully refurbished Davis Plumbing and Heating nameplate. Hillsdale Center for Trades Education. Michael Davis stood across the street, taking in the transformation with a mixture of pride and wonder. The building his grandfather had purchased nearly 80 years ago remained recognizable in its essential character, while evolving into something new and vibrant. Quite a sight, isn't it? Bill Cooper joined him on the sidewalk, leaning less heavily on his cane than he had months earlier. The properly heated home and regular engagement with the training center's development had visibly improved the old veteran's health and spirits. "Grandpa would hardly believe it," Michael acknowledged, "though I think he'd approve of the restoration details." Bill nodded appreciatively. They did right by the original architecture. Victoria insisted on that, said honoring the building's history was essential to the center's mission. Together, they crossed the street toward the building where final preparations were underway for the grand opening ceremony scheduled for noon. The expansion into adjacent properties had nearly tripled the facility's footprint, creating dedicated spaces for instruction in plumbing, electrical work, carpentry and masonry, with plans for HVAC and advanced restoration training in the future. Inside, the front retail area of Davis Plumbing and Heating had been preserved as a reception space, with historical photographs and tools displayed alongside modern interactive kiosks explaining the training programs. The service counter where Michael had written up thousands of work orders over the years remained in place, now staffed by Barbara Nelson, the former town clerk who had joined the center as administrative director. "Morning, Michael, Mr. Cooper." Barbara greeted them warmly. "The mayor just called. He's bringing the state education secretary with him for the ceremony." Michael nodded, still adjusting to the political significance the center had acquired. What had begun as a solution to his personal circumstances had evolved into a model program, drawing attention from educational and economic development officials across the state. They continued through to the workshop areas, where Tyler Adams was directing a team of volunteers in arranging demonstration stations for the open house. Tyler, now officially the center's assistant instructor for plumbing and heating systems, had completed his certification program with honors and grown into his teaching role with remarkable confidence. "Everything on schedule, Tyler?" Michael asked, surveying the activity. "Yes, sir. Martin's just finishing the historical systems display in the restoration workshop." Tyler gestured toward the newest addition to the facility. Ms. Hamilton called. "She's on her way from the airport with the Hamilton Construction Board members." The mention of Victoria sent a small wave of tension through Michael's shoulders. Today represented the culmination of their shared vision, but it also marked a transition in their working relationship. With the center established and operational, Victoria's direct involvement would naturally decrease as she returned to her broader responsibilities at Hamilton Construction. "I should check the restoration workshop," Michael said, more abruptly than he'd intended. "Make sure everything's ready for the demonstration." Bill watched him go with knowing eyes, then turned to Tyler with a slight smile. "How many students have registered for the summer program now?" 37, Tyler reported proudly. "We expected 15 at most. Had to create a waiting list until we can hire another instructor." "Growing pains," Bill nodded approvingly. "The best kind of problem to have." In the restoration workshop, Michael found Martin Fletcher making final adjustments to a display featuring a partially disassembled vintage boiler system. The space represented the culmination of their shared vision for preserving traditional techniques, a fully equipped workshop dedicated to the restoration and maintenance of historical plumbing and heating systems. "What do you think?" Martin asked, stepping back to give Michael a clear view of the display. "Perfect," Michael confirmed, running a hand appreciatively over the cast-iron components. "Students can see all the critical elements without being overwhelmed." Martin nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "The documentation we've compiled could fill a textbook. Actually, Victoria suggested we consider publishing one, Historical Heating Systems, Restoration and Maintenance. Your name as lead author." The unexpected information momentarily silenced Michael. A book with his name on it had never been among his ambitions, yet it represented a way to extend his knowledge far beyond Hillsdale, to preserve techniques that might otherwise be lost to time. "I'd need help with the writing part," he said finally, "but the knowledge that I can provide, that's the idea." Victoria Hamilton's voice came from the workshop entrance. She stood there in a tailored suit, professional as always, but with a warmth in her expression that had become increasingly familiar over their months of collaboration. "Your expertise, with editorial support from our technical writing team." Michael turned to greet her, suddenly aware of how much her presence had come to matter to him beyond their professional partnership. "Welcome back. How was the conference? In Chicago?" "Productive. 3 other communities have expressed interest in establishing similar training centers." Victoria stepped further into the workshop, examining the displays with genuine interest. "But none will have what this one does. Your specific expertise and connection to the community." The simple acknowledgement of his unique contribution meant more than Michael could express. Throughout the development process, Victoria had consistently ensured his role remained central, his knowledge valued rather than exploited. "The board members are touring the carpentry workshop now," Victoria continued. "They're impressed with what we've accomplished here. The chairman specifically mentioned the quality of the renovation work. Local contractors," Michael noted with pride. "Many of them former students of Bill's shop class. They donated time and materials beyond the contracted work." Victoria nodded. "That community investment is what makes this model so powerful. It's not imposed from outside, it's grown from within, with support rather than direction from Hamilton Construction." The insight crystallized something Michael had been feeling but hadn't fully articulated. The center's strength lay precisely in its local roots and authentic connection to traditional craftsmanship, qualities that corporate design training programs often lacked. "We should join the others," Michael suggested, checking his watch. "The ceremony starts in an hour." As they walked together through the building, Victoria updated him on developments beyond Hillsdale. Policy discussions at the state level about trades education, potential funding streams for program expansion, inquiries from other construction companies about apprenticeship partnerships. "Richard Stewart's development project is struggling, by the way," she mentioned, keeping her voice neutral. "Two of his major retail tenants have pulled out of their commitments. Apparently, the market for another strip mall wasn't as strong as he projected." Michael absorbed this information without the satisfaction he might have expected months earlier. Stewart's opposition had ultimately strengthened their resolve and clarified their vision, forcing them to articulate the center's value to the community more effectively than they might have otherwise. "He underestimated Hillsdale," Michael observed, "assumed people would trade character for convenience without a second thought." "A common mistake among developers focused solely on financial metrics," Victoria agreed. "They miss the intangible values that define a community's identity." They emerged into the main reception area, now filled with early arrivals for the ceremony. Town officials, local business owners, prospective students, and their families. Olivia Davis stood near the entrance, having arrived from college in previous evening to support her father at this milestone event. "Dad," she waved, making her way through the crowd to embrace him. "This place looks amazing. I can't believe how much you've accomplished in 6 months." "We've accomplished," Michael corrected, including Victoria in his glance. "It's been a team effort from the beginning." Olivia smiled knowingly at the "we," her perceptiveness making Michael momentarily self-conscious. His daughter had developed an unexpectedly warm relationship with Victoria during the center's development, the two women finding common ground in their analytical minds and commitment to excellence. "Ms. Hamilton has been telling me about the energy efficiency program," Olivia said. "I'm thinking about focusing my senior project on monitoring and analyzing the results from Mr. Cooper's house and the other pilot homes." "An excellent application of engineering principles to practical outcomes," Victoria approved. "And please, I've asked you to call me Victoria." Their conversation was interrupted by Mayor Bennett's arrival, accompanied by a distinguished-looking woman introduced as the State Education Secretary. The growing crowd indicated it was time to prepare for the formal ceremony. As Michael moved toward the podium area set up in front of the building, he caught sight of a familiar figure at the edge of the gathering. Richard Stewart stood apart from the celebration, his expression unreadable as he observed the proceedings. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and Michael offered a small nod of acknowledgement. After a moment's hesitation, Stewart returned the gesture before turning to walk away. The exchange was neither reconciliation nor forgiveness, but recognition of battles fought, principles defended, and a community's choice about its own future. "Quite a turnout," Bill Cooper commented, joining Michael near the podium. "Half the town must be here." "More than that," Michael replied, scanning the crowd that now filled the street in front of the center. "People from neighboring communities, too. Even some of my competitors," Bill smiled. "Not competitors anymore. Potential instructors, mentors, partners in preserving the trades." The shift in perspective struck Michael as profound. The center had transformed not just his business model, but his relationship with the entire community of tradespeople. What had once been competition for limited client resources was becoming collaboration towards shared goals. Victoria approached, accompanied by James Hamilton, her brother and COO of Hamilton Construction. "It's time, Michael. Mayor Bennett wants to begin the ceremony." The formal proceedings unfolded with speeches from local officials, representatives from the educational community, and James Hamilton, who spoke eloquently about his company's commitment to preserving traditional craftsmanship alongside technological advancement. When it was Michael's turn to address the gathering, he approached the podium with uncharacteristic nervousness. Public speaking had never been his strength, but Victoria had helped him prepare remarks that felt authentic rather than scripted. "6 months ago," he began, his voice steadying as he spoke, "I collapsed after installing a heating system for my former teacher, Bill Cooper. It wasn't a smart decision, working 3 days without proper rest, but it was necessary, because in Hillsdale, we take care of our own." He paused, making eye contact with familiar faces in the crowd. What happened next surprised everyone, especially me. Victoria Hamilton, CEO of Hamilton Construction, saw value in what I'd taken for granted. The traditional skills and techniques that are increasingly rare in our modern, disposable society. She proposed not just preserving those skills, but enhancing them, teaching them to a new generation through this center. Michael gestured to the building behind him, the familiar Davis Plumbing and Heating sign gleaming in the spring sunlight alongside. Its newer companion. "My grandfather opened this shop in 1945 after returning from the war. He built it on a simple principle: do quality work that lasts. My father continued that tradition, as did I. Now, through the Hillsdale Center for Trades Education, that commitment to craftsmanship will extend beyond our family, beyond plumbing and heating, to benefit this community for generations to come." His voice grew stronger as he concluded, emotion evident but controlled. "This center exists because one person recognized value in another's work, because a community rallied around a vision larger than any individual, because we collectively chose to invest in skills and knowledge rather than disposable development. I'm proud to be part of that choice and grateful to everyone who helped make it reality." The applause that followed was heartfelt, the community's endorsement of not just the center, but the values it represented. Victoria joined Michael at the podium for the ceremonial ribbon cutting, their shoulders nearly touching as they faced the crowd together. "Thank you," she said quietly, for his ears alone, "for trusting me with your family's legacy." "Thank you for seeing its value," he replied, equally private despite the public moment they were sharing. The oversized ceremonial scissors sliced through the ribbon, officially opening the Hillsdale Center for Trades Education. As applause erupted again, Michael found himself looking not at the crowd but at Victoria, recognizing that their partnership had evolved into something neither had anticipated when she'd first visited Bill Cooper's newly heated home 6 months earlier. The center would stand as the visible manifestation of their collaboration, but the connection that had developed between them, built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection, represented a different kind of legacy, one that had transformed not just a building or a business, but 2 lives previously moving on separate paths. As the formal ceremony concluded and guests began touring the facility, Michael stood in the entrance of what had once been solely Davis Plumbing and Heating, watching the community embrace the expanded vision it had become. Bill Cooper beside him, Olivia and Tyler leading tour groups, Victoria speaking with educational officials, each connected to this moment through a single act of generosity that had sparked an unforeseen chain of events. "Not bad for an old plumber," Bill commented, nodding toward the bustling activity throughout the center. "Not bad at all," Michael agreed, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. "Though I never expected installing your heating system would lead to all this." Bill smiled, the wisdom of his years evident in his expression. "That's how life works, Mike. You never know which act of kindness will be the one that changes everything. For yourself and others, you just have to keep doing the right thing and trust that it matters. The simple truth resonated deeply as Michael surveyed the living legacy that had grown from one such act. Davis Plumbing and Heating remained, its essential character preserved, while evolving into something with far greater impact than he could have achieved alone. And in that evolution lay the answer to the question that had troubled him months earlier. How to honor his family's traditions while creating something meaningful for the future, not by clinging to the past, but by ensuring its most valuable elements continued to serve and inspire new generations. The Hillsdale Center for Trades Education would stand as proof that craftsmanship, community, and compassion remained relevant. Values in a changing world, that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen when we're at our most vulnerable. And that true skill, practiced with integrity, never loses its worth, even in a world that's forgotten how to appreciate it. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch. And don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.